American Express is at your door knocking and your mom's telling you to get out of the basement. Your happiness at that moment probably isn't priority number one. Happiness is important over the long run, but at that moment, it's really financial stability and getting into a better situation for you or your family.
Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back with my main man, Chris Magaña. What's up, Chris?
Hanging, man. Just hanging around.
Yo, my name is Nathan Webster. You're back with NDub Podcast, or Let's Talk Marketing with NDub Podcast, where as you've been following along, if you've been a worldwide listeners, you've been seeing the changes and how we pivoting some things, because we want to talk about a lot more than just marketing, because everything has a marketing element to it and everything circles around marketing. So for your first time listeners, thank you for joining the show. If you like it, please rate it, review, subscribe. And for my worldwide listeners, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate your support. Today's episode is, in case I don't want to mess anything up because I want to make sure I get this right, is how to build wealth for beginners. I know it's a popular topic, and my man Chris here, I'm not going to steal his thunder, but he is a private wealth advisor. I said that right?
Close enough. I'm a money nerd. I'm a money nerd.
A money nerd. Yeah. So this is one thing I love about Chris is because the most humble cat that I've ever met. He doesn't look like a private wealth advisor, right? He's a money nerd, but bro, he drops it like it's hot when it comes to all the knowledge. Cause he put one post and I was like, man, I would be sitting in the back of your class. So this is a very popular topic, and we can break this down any kind of way. Well, I would start with, if you want to build wealth, where do you start?
Well, I think it starts with taking an assessment of where you're currently at. I mean, are you a college student with a student loan? Do you have a job currently? Are you unemployed? Do you have a great income, but you just haven't saved anything? So you have to start with kind of a pause of like, where am I at? And what are my goals? There's a great book. It's dated now. You can find it super cheap. It's from Carl Richardson called The One-Page Financial Plan. It's a great place to start. But I also think you have to kind of assess, like, do you have a family? Are you single? And one of the things that I think all of us should have is like a learning plan, right? Or a growth plan. And so in that plan, it doesn't necessarily tie to money, wealth, building, the next family fortune, become the next Rockefeller. But it kind of helps you grow as a professional, which makes more economic security possible as you get promotions, titles, raises, bonuses, equity in companies, things like that. So I always like to say, okay, where am I at? Like, and what are kind of the three big areas that I really need to tackle? Maybe it's spending, right? Maybe you spend too much. You can't put down the Nordstrom credit card. You spend frivolously on Amazon. You can try simple little things like a spending freeze. Like my wife and daughter, who's an adult now, we all did a kind of a family challenge and just said, unless it's related to smelling good, staying healthy, and not dying, we're not going to spend money for a month, right? And it was amazing. It was amazing. Like there's stuff you're like, oh, I'm just going to pop on Amazon and buy, and I'm like, nope, never mind, I can't. And like I probably saved like $900.
Hold on, say that staying healthy, smelling good.
Yeah.
And what was the third one? Was it eating?
Just basically not dying. Like you need a prescription from your pharmacist. Okay. You need deodorant. You need toothpaste.
Deodorant, not antiperspirant.
What's the difference? I don't know.
That has cancer-causing agents in it.
Okay, well, everything causes cancer. Cancer causes cancer now. But anyways, it's like you got to start with where you're at, right? And start with whatever the challenges really are on hand. I absolutely hate the people that go around peddling things like all you need to do is cut out one Starbucks a week from your budget, and then when you're 90 years old, you're going to have $2.3 million. It's just crazy to me, because if you actually look at, like, if your problem is around spending and just like, hey man, there's just nothing left at the end of the month for me to invest, for me to build wealth, then what you've got to really start with is your spending side, right? And part of that is like, I don't care about that Starbucks. Like if that's your treat, like, some whipped cream and sprinkles once a week to make you feel good and get through a job you may not like, or dealing with two kids that are not appreciative of you. Like, please get that Starbucks, like that, have those sprinkles, ask for a few extra. Like the problem where you're really
caramel drizzle on that.
Yeah, right. I mean, the problem really is when you look at where people spend too much or where like the biggest chunks are, it's usually around housing and transportation. And then meals, right? And like, I think you saw one of my rants where we talked about this, like people can now like make payments on their DoorDash. On a burrito. Like, I'm sorry, like if you can't afford that burrito, then you need to make that at home. Like you're going in debt just for the convenience of being able to sit and binge watch a Netflix show so that you can have your burrito delivered to you. And that Chipotle burrito now isn't, $10.50, it's $27.50 with tax, tip, delivery charge. Like it's crazy. So like you got to start with the big ones, like what are you doing for housing? What are you doing for transportation? And transportation can be a lot of things, right? Like, here in the Northwest, most people have their own car or whatever. My mother-in-law was car shopping. And so I actually went with her to the dealership a couple days ago. And, we were just looking around and I was wandering the lot. And, on there, they kind of tell you, how much it's going to cost per month. And I'm like, man, just like a Honda Pilot, like, I mean, nice, super nice. But, it's not a luxury car by any. I mean, it's got leather, I guess, but Bose, but like $950 a month payment. And I'm like, man, if you've got mom and dad driving around in newer vehicles like that with like a $700 payment, a $900 payment, and then you got to pay insurance on and you have to have comprehensive. I mean, you're $3,000 in almost. And then you throw in some, oil changes and other stuff, just the normal maintenance. Like you're $3,000 in a month. That's $36,000 a year just to drive to work and back and to take the kids to soccer practice.
Man.
Like there's got to be a better way, right? And then the same with housing. Like, I mean, I'm all for people living in safe environments and if you can save money by making sure like you get your kids into the right schools or, a livable environment, pay up for that a little bit. But the reality is most of us don't use all the space that we have now. We just don't. And so like just being mindful of those couple of things. And then hopefully, you don't have health stuff because that's another kind of big one in there that can really blow up a budget. Yeah. But, again, it has very little to do with that Starbucks treat that you have once a week. That latte is not what's killing your budget. It's student loans, it's transportation and it's housing. Like you got to be smart about those things. So, but maybe you're like, Chris, man, I'm good on those things. Like I've got a reasonable place. Whatever, I'm good. I just don't know where to begin. Like I got paralysis around investing. I don't, everybody says I need to do it. I mean, first thing you need to do is start looking at like, does your employer offer a plan? Like, do they offer some sort of savings, investing vehicle for retirement? And take advantage of it. Oftentimes there are some benefits that companies offer you. And a lot of times they offer them not because they're benevolent and they really love you, but it's because it allows the owners and the highly paid employees to put more money away. So there's sometimes they have to throw, some crumbs, but take advantage. If that's where you're at, crumbs are fine, right? Start there and build, right? So take advantage of employer plans. Now, a lot of, especially here in the Northwest, hospitality, service industry is huge. A lot of restaurants, bars, hotels, they don't actually offer, from K-style plans and other retirement vehicles. I think the next, then you can look at, state of Oregon, state of Washington have like savings plans that aren't too bad, like IRAs, individual retirement accounts, things like that. And just start there, right? And go low cost. You don't need to hire me, the suit. There's things called like target date or lifestyle funds that kind of just match your age with the goal. Like my goal is to retire and I'm 30 and I want to retire at 65. Okay, you got a 35-year horizon then, right? And they'll match you up with an investment portfolio that fits that. But the key is just, again, to start, right? And it's, and then I would say like part of your learning plan, and again, your learning plan should be mostly geared towards how do I make my career more fulfilling and how do I create more economic security for me and my family. It should include some sort of like wealth education, financial literacy that doesn't include, some person on TikTok that got arrested for real estate fraud 3 months ago.
That happens. You better do some research.
It happens a lot. I mean, I'm not on TikTok myself, but I have my wife and daughter and they'll send me stuff, and I'll look at it, and I'm like, this is total trash, right? There's plenty of really good stuff too, but you got to kind of know, it's kind of like that old test that your grandma or mom or auntie or somebody told you. Like, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Right.
Like, there's all these ones like open up an LLC and then borrow $1 million. I'm like, and nowhere in there do they talk about, well, no bank's going to do that just because you have an LLC. An LLC, I could open one for $250 before the end of this podcast. And like, no. Wells Fargo's not going to give you $1 million just because you have an LLC. Like, no, they are not. I'm sorry. No. They're going to ask for a personal guarantee. They're going to ask for your firstborn child. They're taking a DNA sample.
I already have that $1 million.
Right. So it's just, there's so much trash out there. So, but again, like so much of this, if you just follow does this sound too good to be true? It probably is, right?
What about when people say take out those like life insurance plans and, borrow? I don't know if it's a borrow against it. I don't know. I don't have a life insurance plan to like go into. I need a life insurance
Your plan is don't die.
That's where I'm at right now.
A lot of us operate on that.
You said a lot of us operate on that?
We do. Okay. There's all kinds, especially, let's kind of circle back to an earlier topic. You said we were joking about cancer, and cancer causes cancer, right? A lot of people can't get insurance because of medical stuff, right? Even though, and so I've got some ideas around that too, but we can talk more about that. So insurance is tricky, right? Like life insurance kind of stuff. And I'm not talking about health insurance for a minute, but so some of the things that I think you should do, like if you are a single individual and you don't support your aunt, your mom or dad, or your nephews, you really don't need any of those fancy like variable life, long-term, whatever policies. Like you really don't. Like, maybe you have a term life insurance, maybe you get a policy through your employer to cover, so that nobody has to, go out of pocket, if your parents or whoever would have to bury you if you tipped over. Like, so maybe you put something small there. You really only start needing insurance when you have people that financially rely on. Right. So if you've got kids, if you're supporting, family members or friends, what happens if you tip over, right? Who's gonna, are they gonna go into destitute? Are they gonna go bankrupt? Are they gonna, so it's really, that's where you need to, and for most people, the most cost effective, especially if you're young and healthy, the most cost effective thing there to do is just do term life. Right. Okay. And so term life basically just says, for the next 10 years, if I die, this person gets whatever you signed up for, 100,000, 500,000, $1 million, and you can term it out to I have a 20-year term, right? Policy. And the nice thing about that is what the benefit's going to be. It's super affordable. And whatever the liability that I'm trying to make sure that if I tip over, that's taken care of. In 20 years, like in my case, I'm like, well, I'll have accumulated enough wealth that if I die, my wife and daughter will be taken care of because I've accumulated 7-8 figures, whatever. So I don't need that policy any longer at the time it expires. So the problem with a lot of these other policies is they kind of go forever and their fees on them are incredibly high. And then they'll try to say things like, well, it's not really an insurance policy. It's really like something for you to transfer wealth to the next generation. And I'm like, well, but the cost for those, it goes up quite a bit. And there's almost always a better way to transfer wealth to the next generation, if that's even your goal. Wow. So I'm a huge fan of term life.
I do hear that a lot.
And the great thing is too, like once you have that policy in place, like they can't, as long as you make the premiums, you're good, right? I have people that will come to me and say, well, Chris, I'm good because I got a $500,000 policy with my employer. And I'm saying, wait, isn't your company going to file bankruptcy potentially in 6 months? Or aren't you looking at maybe moving companies? And they're like, yeah. Or starting your own thing, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well then what happens if you have to get a new policy? And then, what if that little spot right there? What if that's cancer? What if you've got something else that comes up? You're overweight, you're hypertension, like other things can all those things can cause you to be uninsurable or make the premiums to the point where it's like, man, nobody can afford the monthly on these things. So I'm a big fan of having insurance policies outside of your employer. Take those too, because oftentimes employers will beat up the insurance companies and like it's bang for the buck. Like it's a good policy, but it's usually caps out too at like 1 to 3 times your salary. So you make $100,000, you're probably not getting more than about $300,000 insurance through your employer.
No, you have to start paying extra and then submit more documentation. It's like 1.
Yeah, the underwriting piece. Yeah. And sometimes people are okay with that. It's not super. I mean, I've had to do it a few times, and every time they circle back and say you're fat, and I'm like, thanks. I know that.
I think they say, Mr. Magaña,
I mean, no. So it's one of those things that term life, it's in your control. It's not tied through an employer. Bang for the buck. It's going to cover you. And again, like if you're trying to cover, you got 2 little kids at home that are 3 and 5. A 15 or 20 year plan that gets them to that gets them out of the house. That gets them to college, right? And so and then if hopefully by then you've been responsible. You've maybe followed me a little bit. You've learned some things here and there. You picked up some good stocks or whatever, and you've accumulated enough wealth. You're like, okay, good. Now there's enough money in the bank, and there's enough. My balance sheet can cover whatever that term life was in place for. And now the kids are older, and so hopefully they're
you just bring up they say your net worth is dependent upon your network. Now, what if you're starting, if we're going back to the topic, how do I build wealth? What if if my accounts are negative, I'm unemployed, I don't know where to start. We can be in this area here where you need a car, and there's not a lot of hiring happening. There's not a lot of first time or entry level positions. Where can I start? Because, and I know I just asked the question, but the last part I want to say is a lot of it seems like it's around discipline.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, I'll see, and I think this is most of us, and this is in most areas of our life. I think we're really good at like bursts of enthusiasm and energy towards something. Like, I'm going to get a 6-pack. I'm going to, I'm going to make $100,000 a year. I'm going to start a business. And then, you circle back in 3 months and they're like, with that person that, had this big, hairy, audacious goal. And like that energy is faded. Right? They got hit in the face a few times with like, I was complaining about leg day yesterday, right? Like before we started filming, I'm like, man, I might slack for a few days. But like, those are the kinds of things that I think we're really good at, those bursts, but really it's about discipline and sustained effort, right? Mm-hmm. Like you finding Jesus when it comes to saving money for a month or two, great. You don't do the Amazon spend thing. You save a few bucks. You manage to cobble together $800 in your account. That's awesome. But if you're not going to do that consistently, I mean, that $800, the first time you need new tires or a brake job for your car or whatever, it's gone, right? But if you could cobble together that $800 and do that every month, now you're talking, almost $10,000 in a year, right? Now we're talking, right? Now we're talking because $10,000 you can start investing that, and you get 10% on your return by having it in an index ETF, investment thing, and now you made $1,000 off of it.
Okay.
Right? Things like that, right? And then every year it's going to keep compounding. So discipline is a huge part of this, right? It absolutely is. And those bursts, like, it's great to have those bursts, and I think it's good for maybe like making us pivot on, it's like, man, I really got to get my act together and get back in school, or get back on whatever it is that you were trying to do in life. Like, but then you got to find a way to sustain that, right? And it's different for everybody, but like, maybe it's, hey, reaching out to a good friend saying, hey, I need you to hold me accountable to this, weight loss goal, savings goal. Like, just, check in with me once a week and say, hey, man, have you made progress on this? Even if it's something you don't know about, right? Like, all you got to do, hey, this is the question you need to ask me every week. Maybe it's an accountability thing. Maybe it's, maybe it's taking a class. Maybe it's finding a YouTube video that, of like somebody that's an adult that is not going to, get you arrested in a Ponzi scheme or get you in a cult. I highly recommend not getting into a cult.
And there's lots of them, even crypto cults out there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, there's lots of them. So, all right, so okay, keep going with this.
Yeah, because I want to help someone out there. There's someone out there that is listening. They tune in. They said, I want to build wealth, and I want to talk to you out there. You want to build wealth, and maybe you on your last dime. Where can they start?
I mean, I think the other problem we have is I think we all want like calorie-free ice cream, right? We all want like, how do I I'm 10 grand in
keep
debt.
it real. Yeah.
I don't have a job, but I feel like I should be a millionaire in like 5 years. How do I get there? I'm like, it can happen, but it's not going to be pain free. So if you're in debt, no job, working 15 hours a week and, on call kind of stuff, it's going to be painful. And that's the reality. And things should be painful. Nobody said, the pursuit of happiness and joy should come without some hardships. And besides that, like, if you think about your life in terms of like a story, think about like your favorite movies or favorite books, like, man, if there was no setbacks, you wouldn't read that. You wouldn't watch that. Like the whole thing is like somebody that has fallen, somebody that has struggled and has climbed their way back, right? I mean, this is one of the things that like fancy people, like I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant, but like fancy people, like politicians, good. Like the Bushes, the Trumps, all these family legacies, right?
Right.
They're boring people. They have to come up with things like, my kid went to Harvard, my kid did this, my kid played military guy in the reserves but never went, like, because they have to come up with stuff because their lives are actually pretty boring and things were like, you don't have a lot of respect for like, oh, you inherited $100 million. You've never had to struggle. You've never had to live paycheck to paycheck. You never had to worry about the lights turning off. Everything was given to you. And if it wasn't given to you, you walked into the room with the right name and things opened up for you.
Yeah.
So we don't respect that. So that's why they have to come up with things like...
Can't relate to it.
Well, there's no setback, right?
Yeah.
So this is why they have to come up with these things like... come up with resume builders because they're actually pretty boring people, right? That's why they have to do this stuff. So anyways, kind of circling back, like, it's going to be painful. Like, and whatever that means. Maybe that means moving back in with your parents for a year while you get your shit lined up. Maybe that means working a second job. Maybe that means going back to your boss and, closed mouths don't get fed. So maybe you're only working 15 hours a week because they're like, oh, I thought you were a student. And this is actually a true story. The guy's like, I graduated a year ago. And he's like, well, we just assumed you were still in school. Oh, you want to work 40 hours a week? Here's your 40 hours a week. Problem solved because he just did, closed mouths don't get fed. He just kept his mouth shut and they just assumed like, I think a lot of us go around thinking like, people are thinking about us all day long. Like they're not. They're never thinking about you. This is like, my wife always makes fun of me because she's like, you realize like you had your fly down and walking in the room. Like nobody saw. Nobody knows because everybody's thinking about themselves in that room, right? And if they're not, I'm going to act as if nobody did. That way I'm not self-conscious about what I'm walking in with my fly down. I mean, you got to start with where you're at.
That's so windy.
But you got to start with where you're at, and you've got to start being willing to kind of embrace the suck, right? Deal with the pain. Deal with the fact that, you maybe made some poor decisions. And that's okay too, because you're learning too. Like, in a lot of ways I'm bankrupt. Financially, I'm not. But I made bad financial, and I call myself the money nerd, right? Like, but I made some dumb money moves, like earlier in my life. Bought cars I couldn't afford. Bought cars like, I don't really wrench on cars, and bought like a classic that needed like constant love and like didn't know how to take care of it. Like,
those
dumb,
old school classics
things,
need a
right?
lot of work. Yeah.
I bought jewelry that I thought I was going to be a rapper or something. I look back and I'm like, now I've got this jewelry just sitting around like that I would never wear. So, it's okay. It's okay to make some dumb financial moves in the past. The goal is to get better with it, right? The goal is to learn from that and get better. And so it's all right. So give yourself some grace. Say, man, I was dumb. Like I signed this lease for a place that I really couldn't afford. Okay, get out of the lease and get back in your parents' basement and rebuild some savings so you can get moving, right? The answers are really going to come from some disciplined approach of like, and some real tough dialogue with yourself, saying like, where am I at with this? Like, is there something in your job where if you went back and did a 3-month course for some certification that, is going to be a grand to take the course, but the payback is that, you're going to make an extra $10 an hour. Like all of a sudden, like, in 2 or 3 weeks, you're break even for that course. Now, maybe not on the time piece, but those are the kinds of things you need to start thinking strategically about your career and about your own, like, part of it is the happiness piece, but then part of it is like, if you're at the point where your American Express is at your door knocking and your mom's telling you to get out of the basement, your happiness at that moment probably isn't priority number one. Happiness is important over the long run, but at that moment, it's really financial stability and getting into a better situation for you or your family. Unfortunately, in our society, the way it works is like money talks, and you've got to get yourself to a point where you've got to make some more money to be able to make some moves.
So I would say to you, be honest with yourself by talking to people, have vulnerable conversations. I was having vulnerable conversations with Chris before we got on here about life. And I think sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, is just to open up and share and keep it real, because you might be able to figure out your own solutions just by talking to somebody. I think that's where sometimes we just don't want to have that conversation. Oh, go ahead. You gonna say something?
No. Are you doing a time check? What are you doing?
No, I was just
Candy Crush.
Go ahead. I was gonna bring it back here because I wanted to bring it back to, when I said to Chris, like, hey, what do you want to talk about today? I was like, we have how to build wealth for beginners. We could talk about financial literacy, but what it always comes back to is people want to build wealth from where they're at, but then wealth means different things for different people. And sometimes people are okay with just having what you might think is a bare minimum, but who's to say that your wealth or your success or your million, maybe your $1 million is $150,000 a year.
Yeah. I mean, not only is everybody's definition of wealth different, but I also think your definition of wealth should change over time. I like to say, like, money nerds build soulful wealth. That's what I like to say, right? So, like, and what I mean by that is, I call myself a money nerd, but soulful wealth is like, at a certain point, there's a diminishing value of money, right? Like, it doesn't change your life to have another zero in your bank account or another whatever, $1,000 or 10, whatever the number is. It doesn't change your life at all. Like, you're not happier, you're not any different. In fact, you might even be a little grumpier because they're like, I got to pay taxes on this, or like you might fret about, what do I do with this money? How do I make sure I'm not, squandering it? Or it might be the source of where that money's come from. I have a couple clients and a close family member that, the money was through an inheritance, and they don't want to touch it because they feel like this was a very poor substitute for who they lost, right? And so, like, literally, like, they don't touch this money, and it just keeps growing and growing, and so it's like. But soulful wealth is like, man, maybe the goal is like, I don't make the most money, and Fred, who's not as good as me in the office next door, makes more than me, but I take Fridays off, and I coach my kids' little league team, and I go to my daughter's recitals, and we've got a roof over our head, we've got plenty of, that we don't go without. That's wealthy to me, right? I mean, I was just reading about some celebrity that gets like $60,000 a month in alimony for their one kid, and she's broke, right? She's like, she's suing the athlete to try to get more money per month because it's not enough, right? And I'm like, man, for most people, I mean, for 99.9% of the population, $60,000 a month would be more than enough, even if you were living in a high cost area, LA or San Francisco, or so I mean, it's all relative, right? That whole idea of like, well, your first million, well, like, $1 million means nothing to Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, right? Like, but for most of us, $1 million seems like an incredible amount of money. Yeah. So it's all relative. So, and again, like, I think early on, most of us are kind of immature about money, and we think in terms of, we just think of wealth in terms of just the dollars, right? Like, I just need to make $100,000 a year. I just need to make $50 an hour. I just want to have, $10,000 in the bank. And then I think as we get older and mature and start to see life around us, things change and people get taken from us. And, we start to kind of hopefully redefine what wealth means and start thinking in terms of like, what can my wealth do for my community? What can it do for my family? And really, like, the whole point of it, of accumulating financial wealth, should be just for you to be able to do what you want when you want. I mean, if you enjoy working, then work till you're 75. If you want to not work at all and raise your kids, or have one spouse at home, and hopefully the wealth you accumulate allows you to do it. Like all wealth does, financial wealth should create optionality in your life.
I like how you said financial wealth.
That's all it's really designed to do. We become we become kind of like a slave to it, though, where all of a sudden now we're worried about every movement in the stock market or the real estate market, because like you're gonna be good if you've accumulated enough. Okay, the market's down 20%. Well, you know what? That happens about every 5 years. So what? Like, you've got enough financial wealth, but yet you're sitting here worried about it, stressing about it. Meanwhile, your oldest kid won't talk to you. Your youngest kid has an $800 a day Coke habit. Soulful Wealth would say different. Soulful Wealth said, man, your financial wealth is good. Your other stuff, you bankrupt. And you need to start working on those things and use that financial wealth to fix those things. Right? And that's the thing where I think we're so focused on, because I think that's, this is what everybody tells us. Growth. How much is your business grow? How much is your wealth grow? How much is your salary grow? Like, growth. And then, like, are you resting? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking care of your family? Yes, it's important to have financial resources to protect your family. And I think that is, like mission critical type of thing. But there comes to a point where if you're fortunate enough to get there, like start redefining what wealth means, right? Start redefining, like, start taking on only clients that really like fill your soul. Start taking some time off to spend with your kids, because it's been done a bunch now, or people talk about it a bunch, but like, if you got like an 11-year-old at home, you got like 7 more summers with them, right? 7 more Christmas before they're out of the house, right? You got like such a limited amount of time with, like that, if you do an annual camping trip, and they're 15, you got 3 or 4 of those left before they're an adult.
That's if they want to keep going.
And that's if they want to keep going, right? That's if they, there's a point where a lot of kids like, I'm cool, Dad. Like, you're good. Like, yeah, that's not funny anymore. That was funny when I was this big. So, those are the things that, I hope most of us can achieve, like enough perspective and enough financial wealth to get there, right? To be able to zoom out and think like, what is really important, and it's really not, having 6% of your portfolio allocated to NVIDIA, not 5%. Like, it's not the, tariffs took my portfolio down 10%. Like, yeah, that's going to happen. That's just being an investor. You get kicked in the teeth every once in a while. It works out. But what doesn't work out is if, you've broken relationships with people that love you and that you love. What
preach?
If you've taken,
that's deep.
If you've taken relationships for granted, if you've never took that risk you wanted to take because you're worried, well, my stock options vest in another year, and meanwhile you're in a soulless job that's sucking everything out of you, that and you've always wanted to do something different, but you just couldn't do it. Like, man, you're good. Like, you've got, like, so there's a lot of the stuff we do with clients. We spend a lot of time like, okay, you sell medical devices, cool, and you hate it, and you work for a company that you hate, and you don't believe in it, but you make gobs of money doing it, and you're like, but you're a super nerd about coffee, and I've always wanted to open up a coffee shop. Like, do it. Like, you've accumulated enough financial assets, right? Or maybe you're just like, man, I do like what I do, but I've always had this passion for a guitar or whatever. Like, let's find ways. Like, let's get creative and find ways to kind of scratch that itch without, disrupting this other stuff that, that you're doing. And like, people just I think people get creative in their day-to-day grind. They don't get creative in their life in terms of like, what is it about coffee that really gets you fired up, or the guitar, or whatever it is? Like, is there a way for us to like do both? Is there a way maybe you don't need to like quit your job, which pays you a pile of money, to go open up a coffee shop, which will probably fail because a lot of restaurants do. See somebody who's never done it before. Maybe it's you go roast beans with somebody here in town and just offer to do it for free because you just want to be in the culture of coffee nerds. Like, I don't know. there could be lots of different ways to scratch that itch without cutting off your $350,000 a year salary and all the things that come with that, right? But I just think that we're not creative when it comes to, our lives in terms of like, what is it about whatever that is your calling? You always wanted to coach some sport. Like, okay, well, maybe you can't commit to, 4 or 5 practices a week, but maybe you become an assistant coach, right? Maybe what is it about, well, it's really just like shaping youth. Like, okay, there's lots of ways to do that in a different way. Like, you could go volunteer at Boys and Girls Club or any other kind of, United Way or any other program that has youth sports. All right. And it's without the commitment that you can't do it at this point in your life. But we just don't think creatively. I think we get our mind set on like, well, it has to be this, right? It has to be this sports car with this package instead of like, I'll be happy with something different, right? So we just need to rethink some of that stuff.
That was deep, and that's a good way to end this because Chris just said just do it. For those that just need to do the thing that they need to do and reach out to you, how can they do that?
Oh, I guess just I'm on like LinkedIn sometimes. When I can't sleep, I'm on LinkedIn. You can tell I start ranting a bunch. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Magaña. You can also email me if you've got a specific question. I'll try to get back to you. Chris, CHRAS @imscapital.com. I don't know. I got a website coming out if he ever finishes it. So that'll be another way for you to find me. Yeah, but
what's the name of the website?
Isn't it just chrismagaña.com?
Yeah.
So those are the ways to reach out to me. I'll try to answer questions and reach back out. If you're local in the Northwest, I tend to like to drink tea or whiskey and love to meet up with some of you if you have specific questions or think I can help in a meaningful way. So
yeah, and I know this will come out probably of the workshops that he does, but make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn. He does do workshops. He does do walks for those that does walks. He also teaches a course that I know is only specific to a certain group of folks, but if you want to do a workshop, potentially, maybe poke the bear a little bit and he might be able to present one for you. But if you have specific topics about the show, email us at info@nwebsterllc.com. Thanks for coming on, my man.
Thanks, brother.
For those that don't know, I had to be taught this too.
So old.
This is a heart.
It's not a $, it's a heart.
A heart. I didn't know that. Even my kids was like, come on, Dad. It's a heart.
Come on, Dad.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for coming in. Until next time, I wish you nothing but the best. Dream big. Godspeed. We're out.